Hello folks! Well, we've now had the big Midnight expansion reveal along with a bunch of fresh details, and I think it's fair to say that even though thanks to the housing previews and the early reveal of the expansion name back in BlizzCon 2023, was it really that long ago? The WoW team still had rather a lot of surprises up their sleeves, and I'm going to be diving into those surprises, including hopefully a few fine details that you may have missed. Let's start off, of course, with that cinematic. The fully CGI rendered photorealistic cinematics, which Blizzard used to introduce new expansions, have always looked gorgeous, and there is no doubt that over the years their skills have only improved, and those skills were in full display this time around. The cinematic itself offered an array of surprises right from the very start, with Lady Liadrin, the leader of the Blood Elf Paladins, praying to the light for aid before being called to battle alongside Lothamar against Xal'atath's massed army. Xal'atath has always lit up the screen whenever we encounter her, but our CGI portrayal has lifted this to a whole new level, with a great looking but ultimately unsettling vibe as we saw her bring her full might against the Blood Elves, and one that for sure looked like it was bound to succeed. That was until Lady Liadrin's last desperate prayer to the light yielded results. Firstly, through a mysterious comforting hand on her shoulder, followed by what was one of the best cinematic moments I've ever seen from World of Warcraft, as a glowing light emerged from the Sunwell, followed by a massive light-empowered paladin army, many of whom could be seen in the background wearing full Judgment armor. We do not get to see the outcome of that battle. I have a sneaking suspicion that that may be the subject of the Midnight pre-patch, or even the level up campaign, but Xal'atath beating a quick retreat and leaving her army to its fate does suggest that she saw the writing on the wall. And while I'm on the subject of Xal'atath, I'm pretty sure that I'm not the only one who noticed how that light managed to strip her skin of its void hues. Now, I've seen some rather surprising criticisms of the cinematic out there, most notably that Lady Liadrin and Xal'atath really didn't look like their in-game models. Now, obviously, we all have our own preferences, but for me, this is a very odd criticism. World of Warcraft's photorealistic cinematics have never portrayed characters as looking the same as their in-game cartoon style. You only need to look at Variant and Sylvanas from Legion to see that in action. And this is not unique to Blizzard. Cartoon depictions of IRL people also tend to look very different, and I personally instantly recognised Liadrin in this cinematic, so it's not really that different. Overall for me, this was of course a very different cinematic to that of Dragonflight and the War Within, with a much darker theme and a full-on battle. There has been some speculation about what that army actually was, with suggestions including that it could be the Arathi, which was certainly a very credible candidate, alongside the Paladins of the Argent Dawn from Light's Hope Chapel. But we've actually had confirmation of what they really are, courtesy of design director Maria Hamilton, and they are in fact the Army of the Light. We last met the Army of the Light in Legion's 730 patch when we rescued the crew of the Zenidar, who went on to join the Alliance, but that particular army was always improbably small, strongly suggesting that there was very likely many more other paladins out there fighting their own Legion invasions. And it does appear that now they have very likely finished clearing up what was left of the Legion after Sargeras fell. They now have the Void in their sights. But when I look at how unsettling that army looks, especially those cowled figures in their Judgment masks, I cannot help but think that the heroes of Azeroth may eventually come to regret whatever it is that Lady Liadrin has summoned onto Azeroth. One big question that I do have are, where are the Naaru? Given the army could spare 3 Naaru for Outland in the run-up to Burning Crusade, there's always been a very strong impression that there's rather a lot of Naaru out there. and I do wonder if they were the source of the light that seemingly freed Lothamar and the other Blood Elves from Xal'atath's influence. Moving on from that cinematic to something a bit more concrete, and we have got our first details about the shape of the next expansion. Along with the usual increase of the level cap, which is going up to 90, we're getting one reworked and 3 brand new zones, along with a separate 5th storyline that will span some of the existing older zones. We are starting off in a revamped version of Eversong Woods, which has been completely revamped, including a fully rebuilt Silvermoon, which will serve as the new player hub. More on that in a little bit, and will also encompass the Isle of Keldanas and the Ghostlands, all of which are now fully recovered from the scar of the Scourge. After completing the campaign in that first zone, we'll be given a choice, with 2 new zones along with that 5th storyline that we can do in any order. Zulaman, the former Raiden dungeon, is being revamped into a full-size open world zone, where we will explore Atol Aman, the Amani culture, and even seek to recruit the troll lord of war Nalarak to our cause. One of the big questions of the War Within has been, what's happened to the story of the Harronir? Well, that is going to be answered as we journey to the Harronir's homeland of Harrandir, an underground zone beneath the roots of all of the Azeroth's world trees. Note the plural there, and it is where we will eventually be able to recruit the Harronir as an allied race, and that mysterious 5th chapter will see us follow Illyria's son Arator as he visits places like Light's Hope Chapel and Stratholme, as he explores his own personal relationships with the light and the void. And then it will be on to the final zone of Voidstorm, where we'll get to explore Xal'atath's own realm to learn more about the void in our quest to thwart her. Looping back now to Silvermoon, and while the Alliance will be getting access to parts of the new Silvermoon, as it is going to be the expansion's new player hub, it is not going to be completely open to all, as there is also going to be substantial Horde-only areas as well. In the developer panel, design director Maria Hamilton suggested that the majority of Silvermoon is going to remain Horde-only, which is causing some concerns, depending on how large the neutral area is going to be in practice. Expansion hubs, I feel, do need to feel very expansive. There is a risk that if the neutral area is too constrained, it could end up putting Alliance players off from spending much time there. And in an expansion where player housing is being released, the danger of this happening is, I think, a lot higher than normal. The reason that Warlords of Draenor often felt so empty was not, in my opinion, the mere existence of the garrison, but it was the general lack of content in the open world at max level to give players a reason to leave their garrisons. And just as a new hub will for sure need reasons to visit, it is also critically important that the WoW team is not giving us reasons to not visit it. I do think that if the imbalance between the Horde and Alliance areas is too great, there is a very real risk that it could just end up being a Horde-only city in practice. Obviously, we do need to see it in-game to get an accurate handle on this. Silvermoon has always been both the most beautiful, but also the second, behind the Ixodar of course, least populated area in Azeroth, and it would be a terrible shame if the new version ended up suffering the same fate, even if that was just for one faction. For me, the initial leveling experience of a new World of Warcraft expansion is probably one of my favourite experiences. The World of Warcraft art team in world building always seems to deliver, and I'm definitely looking forward to a return to a perhaps less directed experience through Level Up. As is the norm for an early expansion reveal, we don't have a lot of information about the max level open world experience, beyond the introduction of a brand new feature called the Prey System. We have been promised some more information on that in Saturday's System Update developer panel, which I will share early next week. But it does appear it's going to be a variable difficulty system that allows us to choose and hunt down a target throughout Azeroth's older zones along with the new ones, even as it hunts us too. This isn't going to be a player power source, as it will focus entirely on cosmetic rewards. I think it's going to be very hard to get a good read on a feature like this until we can actually experience it, but it kind of just sounds like a more elaborate world boss system, which may be no bad thing. Currently, world bosses kinda do feel a bit pointless, so if it is a replacement for world bosses, I do think it could be a good thing. That said, this feature does not sound like it will be enough in its own to breathe new life into the max level open world experience, which in my opinion has been continually regressing ever since Legion and BFA, so I'm personally hoping that the developers still have something more up their sleeve. In an interview at Gamescon, game director Ian Hazzikostas did mention that he had heard feedback that the open world has been feeling a bit flat for many players. But at the same time, he did seem to be pinning his hopes in this prey system, so I'm not super confident in this front. That said, adding more difficulty levels to the open world, something the dev team are also trying in Legion Remix, could be interesting. But adding more difficulty, I think, isn't enough in its own. Ever since patch 9.2.0, the open world, in my opinion, has been very lacking in both depth and volume of content. Now, the eagle-eared amongst you will of course have noticed that I did mention a Harronir allied race. This of course was something that has been speculated about ever since the launch of The War Within, when data miners spotted that the Harronir NPCs had much more extensive animation and gearing options than is normal. So it wasn't a complete surprise, though I suspect that many players had given up on the idea. Based on what was shared at Gamescom so far, the Harronir will very likely work similar to the Earthen. Most likely, the campaign and side stories from the new zone Harronir will be needed to unlock them, and you will be able to play them as Druid, Warrior, Hunter, Rogue, Priest, Mage, Warlock, Monk or Shaman, and yes, they will be a neutral Horde or Alliance race. Unfortunately, this does mean that there is no new class this time around, which I know will disappoint many, unless of course you're a Demon Hunter fan. That much speculated about third Demon Hunter specialization is also coming in Midnight in the form of Devourer, a brand new mid-range, so I guess similar to Devastation Evoker, specialization which utilizes the power of the Void along with the Demon Hunter's traditional mobility. And as is fitting to a Void theme, Void Elves are also going to be given the option of becoming Demon Hunters. Now, before I move on to the more traditional endgame updates, the new and returning player experience is also getting a bit of a revamp. Exile's Reach is getting a full story refresh, with new recruits being joined by none other than Thrall, Jaina Proudmoore and Rathian, after which they will head off to Dragonflight, which is also getting a mild rework. Now, there is no doubt that the current new player storyline is imperfect, so there is for sure a need for a major tweak like this. But as someone who is also a member of Newcomer Chat and who sees the problems that new and returning players face firsthand, I also hope that the developers address the other major pain points, such as the quest soup and broken phasing in Stormwind that often distracts and confuses people who pass through there. One pain point that I do see a lot that is being addressed is that of returning players, who often come back to find the level 100 character that they left now at level 35ish in a random location which no longer grants them XP, and who, encumbered with years of out-of-date knowledge about how the World of Warcraft experience used to work, ends up fighting the game more than they do enemy NPCs. For these players, there is also going to be a brand new and distinct returning player storyline set in the Arathi Highlands. There isn't any real details about what that will entail, but it is going to be bolstered by an expansion of the lore working system, which will act as a catch-up to enable them to get up to date with the modern storylines. Based on my observations of those returning players' often stubborn determination to stick with the familiar old zones, it is going to have to be something very special to lure them in. Now, while I personally really liked the concept of lore walking, our experience of it in 11.1.7 was marred by far too many bugs, and I do hope that it does get substantial rework before launching to new and returning players. I have said this before, but while we very engaged existing players will mostly just grumble and complain about bugs, new and even returning players won't. If they encounter progress-breaking bugs, rather than fighting to find a way past, many are liable, as I personally do in other new games that I am not as invested in, just Alt F4 and cancel that trial sub. The current level of bugs that we have been experiencing in new patch releases is, in my view, the biggest single impediment that World of Warcraft has for recruiting more players into the game. So I do hope that this initiative means that the team is addressing that issue head on as well. Moving now to the more traditional endgame, and it is very much steady as she goes for Mythic Plus and Dungeons, with the now standard 8 new dungeons at launch. Hands up if you remember the days of Legion when we'd have 10 to 12 at launch. 4 of those dungeons will be in the Season 1 Mythic Plus pool, along with 4 returning dungeons. While I do think that we could benefit from more new dungeons overall, I do think that an 8 dungeon rotation for the Mythic Plus season works really well, and continuing with older dungeons does help to keep that pool feeling fresh from season to season. Mythic Plus, after a rocky start, has done really well in the War Within, and it does make a lot of sense to me for the dev team to continue with that winning formula. Talking about winning formulas, and delves that appear have been enough of a success that they are indeed returning in the next expansion, with 10 brand new delves, that's down from 12 in the War Within, along with the now standard additional Nemesis single boss delve. This is the first time that any of the World of Warcraft team's many swings at developing an alternative to Dungeon and Raid for solo and small group players has been picked up as a returning feature, and deservedly so. While it isn't for everyone, I've personally been a huge fan of delves in the War Within, playing them pretty much for the whole life of the expansion, and it's great to see that winning formula continue to get more development in the future. This time around, the development team will be able to apply the many lessons they have learned from the War Within, and game director Ian Hazzikostas in the dev panel promised us better bosses and the ability to ride in some outdoor delves. One part of the delve formula that is not returning though, thankfully, is Bran, who is being replaced with a brand new companion, Valeera Sanguinar. If you're not very familiar with Valeera, she is a neutral blood elf assassin rogue who in the past acted as King Varian Rin's personal spy and bodyguard, and even as a trusted intermediary between the Horde and Alliance. If you did Stormwind's Horrific Vision, then you've already experienced Valeera as a companion, as she's the one that accompanies you through the Old Town, and she offers a much more sensible and less dramatic companion, which I think will be a very nice break from Don't Stand There. One area of endgame that is getting a shake-up though is raiding. Ever since Legion, and especially BFA, the WoW raiding scene has pretty much followed the same formula of a single large centerpiece raid per seasonal tier, with just the very occasional minor side raid. But this time around, that is all set to change, with not 1 but 3 raids at launch. This concept really isn't new for World of Warcraft. Multiple raids at launch were very much a thing between Burning Crusade and Warlords of Draenor. But with the modern raiding scene being so firmly seasonal, it is going to nevertheless feel like quite a massive change, especially for the race to World First, who will now have to grapple with questions such as, does the raid include all raids or just one of them? Structure-wise, as you might imagine, the sizes of the raids will vary, with the main raid, the Void Spire, having 6 bosses, including the return of Salhadar, and the 2 mini raids, the Dream Rift with 2 bosses, and a single boss March and Quell Danath, which will take us back to the Sunwell Plateau. Raiding, especially at the high end, has felt a bit like it's been in a long, slow decline, pretty much since the second season of the Shadowlands, and it is, I think, very much in need of that shake-up. There is currently no word if this will bring any other changes, such as a relaxation of the fixed 20-man shared lockout in Mythic, but hopefully that will be addressed in Saturday's system update, even if the race to World First does decide to just concentrate on the 6 boss raid, With only 6 bosses, it is very likely to be a much shorter than usual race, and that could offer some major challenges for the modern Big 3 competitors, as they will have to play off the need to do their huge number of split runs to outgear each other against a much higher than usual risk that one of them could just speedrun their way to the final boss, while those others are still stuck in their heroic splits. For the rest of us though, I do personally like the idea of a shorter raid that can be potentially cleared in just one night, albeit I do think that some deeper structural changes to the Mythic raid are still needed to make it a bit more attractive for time-poor adult raiders and enable them to make the jump from a heroic difficulty that for many is now just too easy. PvP always ends up feeling like the forgotten stepchild, but there is at least a brand new 40 versus 40 epic battleground coming called Slayer's Rise. It has been a long time since we have had a new epic battleground. I don't think that it's happened ever since I started playing back at the end of Legion, so this is, I think, very good to see. But given its size, I am doubtful that this will figure in rated PvP, and I do hope that there is more still to be announced for PvP players. That said, the true endgame of course is Transmog, and this is getting a bit of a shake-up. Now, you may have heard some comments about Transmog becoming free, but the bad news is that that is not the case. Instead, Transmog is though going to become quite a bit cheaper. Instead of transmogging your appearances onto gear items, based on the limited information we have so far, we will be transmogging onto the slots instead. This will still cost gold, but when we replace our gear, we won't need to pay again to reapply that transmog. On top of that, there is going to be a new situation-based system, which can automatically change your transmog based on your character's context. The only confirmed example of that so far is that we will have the option of having a different outfit in our houses, but this is a system that I am pretty excited for. For example, I normally, like I suspect many players, prefer to play my character with a hidden headpiece, but I would love for it to be able to have a helmet equipped in combat, and I do hope that we do get an ability to have different transmogs for both in combat and out of combat situations, along with an ability to have a townwear transmog set that we can switch to when we're hanging out in places like Silvermoon. Now, of course, the biggest feature is player housing. This has been the subject of multiple preview articles over recent months, and that does mean that this feature probably has had the least new information to glean from Gamescon. One of the biggest outstanding questions has been around player concerns that the current housing areas are far too human versus orc coded, almost a repeat of the Warlords of Draenor garrison themes, especially on the Horde side. The Alliance human-themed housing preview has looked very homely, and I suspect will be very popular regardless, but I am not so sure that that will be the case for the Orc Roundhouse theme that the Horde are seemingly getting. On that front though, we have had a little bit of good news. At launch, housing is, alongside the human and orc themes, also going to have elven exterior options. Presumably both Night Elf and Blood Elf, though that was not explicitly called out, and there is a promise that the other races will also get options in the future post-launch. The other main piece of new information about housing is around the launch and early access plans, with confirmation that the housing early access preview will be releasing in patch 11.2.7. This early access is going to allow us to choose our housing location, collect decor, and get started in that all-important interior decoration. But the neighbourhood system is not going to be fully functional until Midnight launches. What that probably means in practice, and this is me, I will admit, reading between the lines here, so don't hold Blizzard to this, is that we will be able to create neighbourhoods and choose a location, but the housing endeavour system that will allow us to progress and upgrade our housing will not be active at first. This also probably means that there will be some restrictions on our house, probably lower decoration limits and some limits on the number of rooms, but Blizzard will have to be very mindful that we will be living with these restrictions for probably 2 to 3 months. This, I think, is potentially a good thing, as it will act as a forcing function, requiring the developers to make the day one experience of housing be a lot more functional than it would have needed to have been if the ability to progress and upgrade was there from day one. And this very likely will mean that the day one experience of housing will be a lot stronger than it otherwise might have been, which for sure is very good for us players. Now this is the first of hopefully 2 updates from Gamescon. As I release this video, we still have another developer panel covering game systems, which will very likely cover how talents will change along with more details of gameplay and quality of life improvements, along with 2 major developer interviews. And I plan to be releasing another update early next week to give you all the details from those. But before I do wrap up this video, I do have one little tease from the systems update, and that's for talents. In an interview with Alter Time, Associate Game Director Paul Kubit revealed that we will be getting the usual extra 10 talent points to spend. And these are going to be spread between the class, spec and hero talent trees, with the hero and spec trees getting expansion to accommodate the extra options. In the meantime, I would love to hear your thoughts on what has been revealed so far. What do you think of that new cinematic? And what are you most excited for? But also, what are you most worried about? Comment down below. And if you found this update helpful, entertaining, and even just plain annoying, then do let me know by hitting that like icon. And if you want to support my channel to grow and help me to make more of these videos along with my other content, then do hit that subscribe button right now before you forget. And if you don't want to miss out whenever I release a new video, then as well as subscribing, you can follow me on social media for updates. My links are in the description below as well. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.